I took the job because my credit card companies had started calling at 6 in the morning. The listing said 3 weeks, full pay up front, plus a completion bonus that would zero out 2 of my accounts entirely. The house sat on the Northern California coast, 40 minutes past the last grocery store, perched on a cliff that dropped 200 feet to black rocks and foam. Mr. Calloway met me at the gate on a Tuesday afternoon in March. He was 70, maybe older, with hands that shook when he passed me the keys. 13 keys, he said. Count them. I counted. 13. The main door, the back door, the cellar, the garage, the garden shed, 3 bedroom doors upstairs, the study, the pantry, the wine room, the attic, and one you won't use. He pointed to a small brass key with a red tag. That one stays on the ring. Don't ask which door it opens. His wife waited in a black sedan, engine running. She didn't look at me. Mr. Calloway handed me a folded paper, the kind you'd get from a dot matrix printer, edges perforated. Read this tonight. Follow it exactly. We'll be back on April 2nd. If you leave early, you forfeit the bonus. If you break something, you forfeit the bonus. If you call us unless it's a genuine emergency, you forfeit the bonus. What counts as genuine? Fire, flood, intruder with a weapon. He looked past me toward the house. Nothing else qualifies. He got in the car. They left. The house was gray stone and dark wood, 3 stories with tall windows facing the ocean. The driveway curved through cypress trees that leaned inland, shaped by wind. I parked next to the garage and carried my duffel to the front door. The key turned smooth. Inside smelled like lemon oil and closed air. The entry hall had a slate floor and a staircase that split halfway up. To the left, a living room with furniture covered in white sheets. To the right, a dining room with a table long enough for 12. Straight ahead, a hallway leading to the kitchen. I walked through each room on the first floor, checking windows, turning on lights. Everything worked. The refrigerator hummed. They'd left basics: bread, butter, eggs, milk dated a week out, deli meat, apples, a case of bottled water. I found the study on the first floor past the kitchen. Tall bookshelves, a desk with a green lamp, a leather chair. I set my bag down and unfolded the paper Mr. Calloway had given me. The text was single-spaced, no title, numbered 1 through 13. 1. Lock the front door and the back door at 8 o'clock every evening. Check both locks at 8:15 and again at 9:30. Do not open either door between 9:30 in the evening and 6:30 in the morning for any reason. 2. The cellar door is in the kitchen next to the pantry. Keep it locked at all times. Do not open it after dark. If you hear sounds from below after sunset, ignore them. 3. Between 10 o'clock in the evening and 2 o'clock in the morning, stay on the first floor. Do not go upstairs during this window. 4. If the phone rings between midnight and 3 in the morning, let it ring. Do not answer. The phone will stop after 9 rings. If it rings a 10th time, leave the room immediately and do not return until the ringing stops. 5. The garden shed is located 60 yards west of the house. Do not approach it after 7 in the evening. If the shed door is open in the morning, close it from at least 10 feet away using the hooked pole stored beside the back door. 6. A gray cat may appear on the back porch. You may feed it, but do not let it inside. If it scratches at the door after 11 at night, move to a room on the opposite side of the house until the scratching stops. 7. The wine room is in the cellar. You are welcome to 1 bottle per week. Enter only during daylight hours. If you see a second staircase inside the wine room, do not use it. Leave immediately and lock the door behind you. 8. On foggy nights, close all curtains on the ocean-facing side of the house by 7:45. Do not look out those windows after 8 o'clock until sunrise. 9. If you see someone standing at the edge of the cliff, do not call out to them. Do not approach. Go inside, lock the doors, and wait 30 minutes before looking again. 10. The attic door is at the end of the second-floor hallway. You may go up during the day to check for leaks. If you hear footsteps above you at night, do not investigate. They will stop on their own. 11. Do not bring guests to the property. If someone knocks on the door claiming to be a delivery driver, a neighbor, or a utility worker, verify their vehicle from a window before opening. If you cannot see a marked vehicle, do not open the door. 12. Every 3 days, walk the perimeter of the house in daylight and check that all ground floor windows are latched. Count the windows. There should be 18. If you count a different number, go back inside and wait 1 hour before recounting. 13. Keep this list with you. If you find a second copy of this list anywhere in the house, burn it immediately in the kitchen sink. Do not read it first. I read it twice. Then I checked my phone. No signal, but they'd told me that. The landline worked. I had the Callaway's contact number written on the back of the paper, along with the nearest hospital and the non-emergency sheriff's line. I made a sandwich and ate it standing at the kitchen counter. It was 4:30. The sun was still up, but it hung low over the water, turning everything orange. I walked upstairs to pick a bedroom. 3 doors, all unlocked. I chose the middle one because it had a view of the driveway and the cypress trees instead of the ocean. I didn't want to wake up looking at the cliff. The room had a double bed, a nightstand, a lamp, and a closet. I unpacked my clothes, plugged in my laptop, and sat on the bed. The Wi-Fi was password protected, and the password was written on a slip of paper taped to the router downstairs. I went back to the Yeyut's study, found the router behind the desk, and typed in the code. It connected. I spent an hour answering emails and paying bills I could now afford to pay. At 7:30, I went through the house and closed every curtain facing the ocean. Fog was rolling in, thick and low, erasing the cliff and the water. I made sure each curtain met in the middle with no gap. At 8 o'clock, I locked the front door and the back door. Both deadbolts were solid. At 8:15, I checked them again. Locked. At 9:30, I checked a third time. Still locked. I went to the study, turned on the green lamp, and opened a book I'd brought. The house was silent except for the wind outside and the occasional creak of old wood settling. At 10 o'clock, I heard a thump from upstairs. I looked at the ceiling. Another thump, like someone taking a heavy step. I waited. 3 more steps, evenly spaced, crossing from one side of the house to the other. Then nothing. I stayed in the study. The footsteps didn't return. At 11, I went to the kitchen for water and saw the cellar door. Locked. I tugged the handle to be sure. I heard something below, faint and rhythmic, maybe a pipe or a draft moving through a gap. I stepped back and returned to the study. At midnight, the phone rang. It sat on the desk, an old beige landline with a coiled cord. I watched it ring. Once, twice, 3 times I counted. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It stopped. I exhaled and realized I'd been holding my breath. I waited. Silence. I picked up the receiver and heard a dial tone. I put it back. At 2 in the morning, I went upstairs to bed. The hallway was dark except for a nightlight plugged in near the bathroom. I brushed my teeth, changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt, and lay down. The wind picked up, rattling the windows. I fell asleep listening to it. I woke at 7:15. Sunlight came through a gap in the curtains. I dressed and went downstairs. The front door was locked. The back door was locked. I opened the back door and stepped onto the porch. The air was cold and clean. The fog had burned off. I could see the edge of the cliff, the ocean beyond, and the garden shed to the west. The shed door was closed. I made coffee and scrambled eggs. At 9, I walked the perimeter of the house, checking windows. I counted as I went. 18, all latched. I returned to the kitchen and looked at the list again. Every 3 days. That meant I'd check again on Friday. The day passed quietly. I cleaned the kitchen, read, Walked down the driveway to the edge of the property where the pavement turned to gravel. I didn't see anyone. No cars passed. At 7, I closed the ocean-facing curtains. At 8, I locked the doors. At 10:30, the footsteps came again. I was in the living room this time. They started at the far end of the second floor and moved slowly toward the stairs. I counted 7 steps. They stopped. I waited. Nothing else. The phone didn't ring that night. On the 3rd day, I walked the perimeter again in the morning. 18 windows, all latched. I was starting to relax into the routine. The house was strange, but it followed its own logic. I could work with logic. That afternoon, I went to the garden shed. It was past 4, still light. The shed was wooden, painted gray to match the house, with a sloped roof and a padlock that hung open. I pulled the door. It swung outward on stiff hinges. Inside were tools: rakes, shovels, a wheelbarrow, coiled hoses, bags of soil, pruning shears on hooks. Everything was dusty but organized. I took a pair of shears to trim some overgrown branches near the back porch. I worked for an hour, cutting and piling the branches by the tree line. When I finished, I returned the shears to the shed and closed the door. The padlock clicked shut. At 6:45, I went inside. I glanced back at the shed. The door was closed. I locked the back door and started dinner. At 8, I checked the locks. At 9:30, I checked them again. At 10, I stayed downstairs. The footsteps came at 11 this time. They were faster, less evenly spaced. I counted 9 steps before they stopped. I sat in the study with the green lamp on and read until midnight. The phone rang. I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It stopped. I waited. No 10th ring. I went to bed. On the 4th morning, I woke at 6 and went downstairs to make coffee. I opened the back door to check the weather. The shed door was open. I stared at it. I'd closed it. I'd heard the padlock click. I stepped back inside and found the hooked pole beside the door. A long wooden rod with a metal hook on the end, the kind you'd use to pull a high window shut. I carried it outside, walked to within 10 feet of the shed and extended the pole. The hook caught the edge of the door. I pulled. The door swung closed. The padlock was still hanging open. I used the pole to push it through the latch and press it shut. It clicked. I returned to the house and put the pole back. Nothing else was wrong. I checked the windows, 18, all latched. I checked the front and back doors, locked. I spent the day inside. I didn't go near the shed. That night, fog came in heavy. By 7:30, I couldn't see past the porch railing. I closed all the ocean-facing curtains by 7:45 and made sure they overlapped in the center. I ate dinner in the kitchen and washed the dishes. At 8, I locked the doors. At 10:15, I was in the study when I heard something outside, not footsteps. A low scraping sound like metal on stone. It came from the direction of the back porch. I turned off the green lamp and waited in the dark. The scraping continued for a minute, then stopped. I heard a faint scratching at the back door, rhythmic, deliberate. I looked at the list. A gray cat may appear on the back porch. You may feed it, but do not let it inside. If it scratches at the door after 11 at night, move to a room on the opposite side of the house until the scratching stops. It wasn't 11 yet. I turned the lamp back on and waited. The scratching continued. At 11:04, I got up, walked to the front of the house, and sat in the living room. The scratching was faint from there, but still audible. It went on for 8 minutes, then it stopped. I stayed in the living room until midnight. The phone didn't ring. I went upstairs at 12:30 and lay in bed listening. The wind moved through the cypress trees. Somewhere above me, a single footstep. I didn't investigate. On the 5th morning, I found a dead bird on the back porch. It was small, brown, with its neck bent wrong. I put on gloves, picked it up with a paper towel, and threw it into the trees. There were no other marks on the porch, no scratches, no blood. I checked the shed. The door was closed. I called the Callaway's number. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. A dead bird wasn't fire, flood, or an armed intruder. The rest of the day was quiet. I worked on my laptop, ran through my budget again, and confirmed that the completion bonus would clear my 2 largest debts with enough left over for first and last month's rent somewhere new. I needed this job to work. I needed to stay the full 3 weeks. At 7, I closed the curtains. At 8, I locked the doors. At 9:30, I checked them. At 10, I heard the footsteps, 11 steps this time, fast and uneven like someone was running. They stopped abruptly. I gripped the arms of the chair and counted to 60. Nothing else. At midnight, the phone rang. I counted. 9 rings. It stopped. At 2 in the morning, I went upstairs. I passed the attic door at the end of the hallway. It was closed. I didn't touch it. On the 6th day, I walked the perimeter. 18 windows, all latched. I made a note on a piece of paper, checked March 14th. I'd check again on March 17th. That afternoon, the wind picked up. The cypress trees bent and swayed. Branches tapped against the windows. I watched from the study as the ocean turned gray and choppy. By evening, the wind was loud enough to drown out smaller sounds. I closed the curtains early and locked the doors at 8. At 10:30, I thought I heard the footsteps but couldn't be sure over the wind. At 11, the scratching came at the back door. I moved to the living room. The scratching lasted 12 minutes this time. At midnight, the phone rang. I counted. 9 rings. It stopped. At 2, I went to bed. The wind shook the windows in their frames. I pulled the blanket over my head and fell asleep. On the 7th morning, the wind had died. I went downstairs and checked the doors. Locked. I opened the back door and stepped outside. The shed door was open again. I got the pole and closed it from 10 feet away. The padlock clicked. I went back inside. At 9, I walked the perimeter even though it wasn't the 3-day mark. 18 windows, all latched. I counted twice to be sure. I spent the rest of the day reading and trying not to think about how many days were left. 16. 16 more days. I could do 16 days. That night I followed the routine. Curtains at 7, locks at 8, 8:15, 9:30. At 10 I stayed downstairs. At 11 no scratching. At midnight the phone rang. I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Silence. I waited. A 10th ring. I stood up and walked out of the study. I went to the kitchen, then to the living room, then to the dining room. The phone kept ringing. 11, 12, 13. I stood in the hallway and covered my ears. 14, 15. At 16, it stopped. I waited 5 minutes. I went back to the study. The phone sat on the desk, silent. I picked up the receiver, dial tone. I put it back. I didn't sleep well that night. On the 8th morning, I found scratches on the back door. 4 parallel lines deep enough to splinter the wood. They started at the handle and dragged down about a foot. I ran my finger along them. They were fresh. I went inside and looked at the list. A gray cat may appear on the back porch. You may feed it, but do not let it inside. I hadn't fed it. Maybe that was the problem. I opened a can of tuna, put it in a bowl, and set it on the porch. I went back inside and watched from the window. At noon, the bowl was empty. I didn't see what took it. I checked the perimeter again, even though it wasn't time. 18 windows, all latched. That night, I closed the curtains and locked the doors. At 10, the footsteps came. 13 steps, evenly spaced. At 11, the scratching started. I moved to the living room and waited. The scratching stopped after 9 minutes. At midnight, the phone rang. I counted. 9 rings. It stopped. I went to bed at 2 and lay awake until 4. On the 9th morning, the bowl was on its side, empty. I refilled it. By evening, it was empty again. On the 10th morning, the shed door was open. I closed it with the pole. That afternoon, I walked the perimeter. 18 windows. On the 11th night, the phone rang 16 times again. I left the study and waited in the kitchen. It stopped at 16. On the 12th morning, I found another dead bird. I threw it into the trees. On the 13th morning, I woke at 6 and went downstairs. The front door was locked. The back door was locked. I opened the back door and stepped onto the porch. The bowl was gone. I looked around. I didn't see it anywhere. I went back inside. At 9, I walked the perimeter. I counted the windows. 19. I stopped. I counted again slowly, touching each window frame as I passed. 19. I went inside and waited 1 hour. At 10:15, I walked the perimeter again. 18 windows. I went back to the study and sat down. My hands were shaking. I made coffee and drank it too fast. I checked the list. Count the windows. There should be 18. If you count a different number, go back inside and wait 1 hour before recounting. It had worked. The number was right now. That night, I closed the curtains and locked the doors. I checked the locks 3 times. At 10, the footsteps came. At 11, the scratching came. At midnight, the phone rang 9 times. At 2, I went to bed. On the 14th morning, I woke to the sound of something breaking. I sat up. The sound came from downstairs, from the kitchen. I grabbed my phone, no signal, useless, and went to the hallway. I listened. Nothing. I walked downstairs slowly. The kitchen light was off. I turned it on. The cellar door was open. I stopped in the doorway. The door stood wide, the lock dangling from the hasp. The staircase descended into darkness. I could smell something from below, damp and earthy like wet leaves. I stepped back. I didn't go closer. I looked at the list. Keep it locked at all times. Do not open it after dark. If you hear sounds from below after sunset, ignore them. It was morning. Sunrise had been at 6:43. It was 7:12. I approached the door. I didn't look down the stairs. I pulled the door shut and turned the lock. It clicked. I tugged the handle. Locked. I checked every window on the first floor. All latched. I checked the front and back doors. Locked. I sat in the study and tried to think. The door had been locked last night. I'd checked it myself at 9:30. Something had opened it. I made breakfast but didn't eat much. At 10, I walked the perimeter. 18 windows. I walked it again at noon. 18. That night, I closed the curtains early. I locked the doors at 8 and checked them 4 times instead of 3. I put a chair in the kitchen facing the cellar door and sat in it from 10 until midnight. The door didn't move. The footsteps came from upstairs at 11. The scratching came at 11:30. At midnight, the phone rang 9 times. At 2, I went upstairs. I lay in bed with the light on. On the 15th morning, the cellar door was locked. The bowl was back on the porch, upside down. I left it. I spent the day inside. I didn't walk the perimeter. I sat in the study and read the same page 6 times. That evening, I heard a voice outside. It was faint, coming from the direction of the cliff. A man's voice calling something I couldn't make out. I went to the living room and pulled the curtain back an inch. Fog was rolling in, thick and early. I could see a shape standing at the edge of the cliff, maybe 80 yards away. Dark clothes, arms at their sides. I let the curtain fall. I checked the list. If you see someone standing at the edge of the cliff, do not call out to them. Do not approach. Go inside, lock the doors, and wait 30 minutes before looking again. I was already inside. I checked the doors. Locked. I set a timer on my watch. 30 minutes. I sat in the living room and waited. At 28 minutes, I heard the voice again, louder. It was calling a name. Michael. Pause. Michael. I didn't know anyone named Michael. I stayed in the chair. At 30 minutes, I went to the window and looked. The shape was gone. I checked the cliff edge from 3 different windows. Nothing. I closed all the curtains and locked myself in the study. At midnight, the phone rang. I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I left the room. The phone kept ringing. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I went to the kitchen and stood by the sink. 18, 19, 20. It stopped. I stayed in the kitchen for an hour. When I went back, the study was empty. The phone was silent. On the 16th morning, I called the Callaways' voicemail. I left a message this time. "This is the house sitter. I need to ask a question. Please call back." They didn't call. I walked the perimeter. 18 windows. I checked the shed. Closed. I checked the cellar door. Locked. That night, the footsteps came at 10 and again at 11. 13 steps, then 7 steps, then nothing. The scratching came at 11:45 and lasted 22 minutes. At midnight, the phone rang 9 times. At 2, I went to bed. I heard something above me at 3, a long, dragging sound, like furniture being moved. I didn't investigate. On the 17th morning, I found the bowl on the porch again. This time it was right side up, clean and filled with something dark and thick. I didn't touch it. I left it there and went inside. I skipped breakfast. I sat in the study and stared at the list. 13 rules. I was following them. I was doing everything right. But things were escalating. At noon, the phone rang. I picked it up. "Hello? This is Mrs. Callaway." Her voice was flat, formal. I exhaled. "Thank you for calling back. You left a message." "Yes, I have some questions about the list. The cellar door opened on its own, and last night the phone rang more than 9 times, and—" "Is the house still standing?" "Yes." "Are you injured?" "No." "Is there fire, flood, or an armed intruder?" "No." "Then there is no emergency." Her tone didn't change. "Follow the list. Do not call again unless it's genuine. We'll see you on April 2nd. She hung up. I stood there holding the receiver, then I put it back. I walked the perimeter twice that afternoon, 18 windows both times. I checked the shed, closed. I checked the cellar door, locked. I checked the front and back doors, locked. At 7, I closed the curtains. At 8, I locked the doors and checked them 3 times. At 10, the footsteps came. At 11, the scratching came. At midnight, the phone rang 9 times. At 2, I went to bed. On the 18th morning, I woke to silence. No wind, no birds, nothing. I went downstairs. The front door was locked. The back door was locked. The cellar door was locked. I opened the back door and looked outside. The bowl was gone again. The shed door was open. I got the pole and closed it. I walked the perimeter. 18 windows. I made coffee and sat in the study. I had 12 days left. 12 more days, and I'd have the money. I could do 12 days. That night I followed the routine. At 10, the footsteps came. 15 steps this time, fast and heavy. At 11:30, the scratching came and didn't stop until 12:14. At midnight, the phone rang 9 times. At 2, I went upstairs. I walked past the attic door. I heard something on the other side, a rhythmic tapping like knuckles on wood. I went to my room and shut the door. On the 19th morning, I found scratches on the front door, deep parallel lines, 4 of them. I touched them, fresh. I checked the perimeter, 18 windows. That night, the footsteps came at 9:58. I wasn't ready. I was still in the kitchen. I froze. The steps crossed the 2nd floor, 13 of them, then stopped. I waited. At 10, I heard them again, directly above the kitchen. I counted. 7 steps. They stopped. I went to the study and stayed there. At 11, the scratching came at both doors, front and back, at the same time. I moved to the dining room, the center of the house, and sat at the long table. The scratching lasted 31 minutes. At midnight, the phone rang. I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. It stopped. I stayed in the dining room until 3. On the 20th morning, I didn't check anything. I made coffee and sat in the study with the door closed. At noon, I forced myself to walk the perimeter. 18 windows. At 3, I checked the shed. Open. I closed it. At 7, I closed the curtains. At 8, I locked the doors. At 10, the footsteps came. At 11, the scratching came. At midnight, the phone rang 21 times. At 2, I went to bed. On the 21st morning, the cellar door was open again. I closed it and locked it. I walked the perimeter. 19 windows. I went inside and waited 1 hour. I walked again. 18 windows. I sat in the study and put my head in my hands. That night, everything happened at once. At 10, the footsteps came from 3 directions, upstairs, from the cellar, and from the attic. At 11, the scratching came at every door and every window on the first floor, a simultaneous scraping that filled the house. At midnight, the phone rang and didn't stop. I sat at the dining room table with my hands over my ears and counted. I got to 47 before it stopped. At 2, I went upstairs. I didn't hear anything. I went to bed and didn't sleep. On the 22nd morning, April 2nd, was 9 days away. 9 days. I could do 9 days. I checked the doors. Locked. I checked the cellar. Locked. I checked the perimeter. 18 windows. I spent the day in the study. I didn't eat. I drank water and coffee and read the list over and over. That night, the routine held. Footsteps at 10, scratching at 11, phone at midnight, 9 rings. On the 23rd morning, I found a second copy of the list on the kitchen counter. It was identical to the first, same dot matrix print, same perforated edges. I didn't read past the first rule. I took it to the sink, held a lighter to the corner, and watched it burn. The paper curled and blackened. When it was ash, I ran water over it and washed it down the drain. I checked the original list, still in my pocket. That night, the phone rang 9 times. On the 24th morning, I walked the perimeter. 18 windows. I checked the shed. Closed. I checked the cellar. Locked. 7 days left. That night, I heard the voice again. Michael. I ignored it. On the 25th morning, the bowl was back on the porch, filled with the dark, thick substance. I didn't touch it. 6 days. On the 26th morning, I woke to scratching inside the walls. It moved from the first floor to the second floor over the course of an hour, then stopped. 5 days. On the 27th morning, I found the attic door open. I closed it from 10 feet away, using a broom to push it shut. I didn't look inside. 4 days. On the 28th morning, the scratching on the doors had gotten deeper. The wood was splintering. I checked the locks. They held. 3 days. On the 29th morning, I walked the perimeter. 18 windows. I checked them again at noon. 18. I checked them at 5. 18. 2 days. On the 30th morning, the phone rang at 6 a.m. I counted. 9 rings. It stopped. 1 day. On the 31st morning, I packed my bag. I checked every lock in the house. I walked the perimeter. 18 windows. I checked the shed. Closed. I checked the cellar. Locked. I sat in the study and waited. At noon, I heard a car in the driveway. I looked out the window. The black sedan. Mr. and Mrs. Calloway got out. I met them at the front door. Mr. Calloway unlocked it with his key and stepped inside. He looked around. Mrs. Calloway followed. "Everything in order?" he asked. "Yes." He walked through the first floor, checking windows, checking doors. Mrs. Calloway went upstairs. I heard her footsteps above. They came back 15 minutes later. "Good," Mr. Calloway said. He handed me an envelope. "Completion bonus, thank you." I took it. "Can I ask you something?" "No." What We're not here to answer questions. Mrs. Calloway's voice was sharp. You did the job. You followed the list. That's all. Mr. Calloway walked me to the door. If you ever need work like this again, call the number on the back of the list. We know people. I stepped outside. The door closed behind me. I got in my car and drove. I didn't look back. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a woman named Mrs. Voss. She had a property in Oregon, a farmhouse, 5 weeks, full pay up front. She said Mr. Calloway had recommended me. There's a list, she said. 17 rules. Can you follow 17 rules? I looked at the envelope on my desk. The completion bonus had cleared my debts. I had first and last month's rent for a new place. I didn't need another job like this. Yes, I said. She gave me the address. I wrote it down.